So now just bringing this all home into the design process, going from design thinking, the development life cycle, and operations and monitoring. We're going to pause in a second. This is a lot to take in on this slide, but what we've done is tried to bring over some of those assessment questions and principles and start to say to ourselves, where might you have some of these kinds of conversations? Or are some of the things that have to do with some of these principles that you're reading about in terms of AI ethics, are they things that your governance group should be caring for in reviewing solution teams or interacting with legal department or ethics groups? And, I'll just take a couple examples, maybe looking at autonomy. Did you assess whether there could be groups who might be disproportionately affected by the outcomes of the AI system? This may or may not apply. Again, it really depends on the kind of system that you're building, but our initial thinking is that there might be work products and activities within analysis and design, and after a system is deployed in operations, where you would want to be looking for that, or have steps or interventions in place to care for what you might have not thought of in analysis and design would occur, actually did occur in operations. Maybe someone was negatively affected by a system. We hear about these things all the time. Then that could be impacted if the people who work in operations are thinking in these terms, or have checklists that are helping them kind of just think through things on a day-to-day basis, or updated work products to do this. Over on the right, post-implementation bias monitoring procedures in place, or do you have the potential, does the system have the potential to discriminate over time because it's learning? Maybe this is something that in analysis and design and deployment and operations would be the three major checkpoints or steps in the solution life cycle, where you could take care and concern and start to address that principle within the design of a particular autonomous system. I think I'll talk about one more. What are the audit approaches to reviewing training data and its handling and use practices? Our thoughts were that would be something that might be handled in requirements. So I think what we'll do is keep this slide up. I think this is our last slide before our questions, and just ask folks to open up the questions, and let's talk about this a little bit, because we want to walk away from this call getting your input and thoughts on, are you embedding these practices? Do some of the things that we're saying here resonate? So I'll pause. Well, I guess we open. Rob, you have the questions set, or the questions in the chat?
Yeah, at this time, there's no questions.
No questions.
So Gwen, I have a question. I couldn't type it in chat fast enough. So where do you see the level of maturity in the industries in regard to adopting these practices?
Wow, that's a really good question. Because adoption is a relative thing. I mean, what we're seeing, on one hand, some industries like the medical industry, medical research, they've been using this stuff for a long time in robotics that do operations on people and various things. The IEEE has done an awful lot of advanced thinking for industries like that, industries that are doing analysis on genetics and various things like that. I think there's much more interest. In fact, the clients that we're talking to are mostly in the medical research field or insurance industry, right? Because I think they're being
Mhm.
yeah. But again, I have to say, it's kind of a relative thing because on one hand, a lot of the feedback in the industry is that they say organizations are saying they're mature, they're saying they're embedding these practices, they hire a chief ethics officer, then this doesn't work out, and we run into terms like ethics washing and ethics bashing, right? Ethics washing being they're hiring a chief ethics officer, but they're not really doing anything, or they're not really empowering the chief ethics officer or setting those roles and responsibilities and embedding practices into their processes like these. They kind of just want to, do make it look like they're doing it. But ethics bashing is, in fairness to solution teams, when I think it's a fair question for a solution designer to say, look, Mr. Ethicist, if you can't tell me how to design for discrimination, or you can't tell me how to design for autonomy, or you can't tell me how to design for well-being, I need to move on and get my work done,
Mhm.
So, but I think it varies, but I do think that the medical industry and insurance is making some progress. I would ask other folks on my team, because I know Kim has experience in some of these industries, so some folks might have other views on other industries that are mature.
Yeah, I would agree that healthcare is as well. I actually worked in a I would say pretty new data science group embedded within a large healthcare system. And at the time, I think it was at the stage that they were really just asking, like, how do we do this stuff in an ethical way? And I think ethics is always at the center of healthcare, as is privacy, because there's, HIPAA has been around for a very long time. And so I think they were very early in adopting this, and because it's such a high stakes field. And you have very opinionated stakeholders like doctors. So I think when you have that
Mhm.
combination, you're going to, see people really, industries really take their time to get these questions answered. Others, I've primarily worked in, I guess, what you would call the tech industry. I don't know that I believe there is really a tech industry, but yeah, I think like within the startup environment, which people are like trying to, ideate and create new products that are supposed to revolutionize our lives, I would say that very little thought is put
Right.
into ethics. It's really, there the focus is, as much as startup folks want to believe that we're doing this to really change the world, and we're going to make it a better place, and our product's going to make people's lives better, they're looking to get a big buyout, right? and
Right.
I don't really think that they carefully think about this stuff at all. And they I'll complain about this later in my session, but they prototype quickly, and usually at the expense of taking their time to think about what data they're using, how their existing data is biased, and how their methods could cause potential harm, especially for the most vulnerable groups out there.
Yeah, thanks for that. And the reason I'm asking is HIPAA is one thing, and that's usually, at least from my experience, I'm going to say the legal side of the house that's embedded in the processes of IT and all that kind of stuff, where ethics isn't so much. And that's why I was asking the question.